Welcome everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about a possibility that I find to be very exciting as a hardcore Metroid fan. Now, will this happen? We don't know. It's simply something that I think is interesting that we're entertaining for a fun discussion. But there have been some going-ons lately when it comes to the Nintendo Direct rumor mill, so we'll be updating you on that and then going into how this might sort of suggest something else instead, and perhaps that something else might make sense as a big Metroid Prime 4 related direct. But before we go forward, let me point out that we are aiming for a goal of 40,000 subscribers, so if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So let's first provide the updates when it comes to the Nintendo Direct rumor mill situation. So if you hadn't heard prior, when the initial reports came out a little while back that the Switch 2 was getting delayed to early 2025 at the earliest, the initial source was Brazil from his podcast. But on Family Boards, he stated that he had heard that the plan was to have an Indie World and then a Nintendo Direct in April, and then some sort of Switch 2 reveal in June. This was said back on February 19th. And when this happened, Necrofelipe, the owner of Universal Nintendo on Family Boards, actually said that they heard something similar, but that it would be a general direct. So here you have two different people who are respected and considered to have good track records and inside knowledge, suggesting that there would be a direct in April. Of course, this was said back in February, and Brazil did note that things could be subject to change. But more recently, on March 27th, Brazil looked into things, and at that point, he said that the Indie World presentation could still potentially happen within the time frame he was given, but that the April Direct is still a go as of last week. Again, this post is made on March 27th. But then he also said here, but please remember that the last Direct was delayed by a week the week of, and be kind to Pioro, Necro, Nate, and whoever else decides to volunteer further info. From my end at least, things only really start materializing in a solid way a week before the planned date. Until then, it's always up in the air, which is why I promise I won't talk about event dates anymore after these go down. I find that last part interesting, but I'll explain why in a moment. Brazil has offered another update when it comes to the Nintendo Direct situation. So this was posted yesterday, April 11th. Hey everyone, didn't want to leave you hanging for the entire month, so here I am. You'll remember that the info I had back during the Switch 2 delay week was that we'd have a Direct in April and an Indie World presentation prior to that. I had those talks a couple of days after the Switch 2 discussions, but I now believe that the event info itself was already outdated at that point. I no longer believe we'll get a Direct this month. Apart from one person who heard some rumblings 2 weeks ago, no one else seems to have heard anything about an April Direct since then, which they probably would have at this point. One source in particular that had talked about an April Direct before is now expecting the next one to happen around the obvious Summer Game Fest timeframe, so late May, early June. Edit, this was done afterwards, maybe even this is wrong, but we will get PlayStation Xbox events in that time frame at least. The Indie World seems to have been planned to be aired pre-Game Developers Conference, but I guess all those plans went out the window immediately as well. Anyway, that's it, the beauty of talking about planned event dates months in advance, haha. I'll catch flack for this, and that's alright, but hopefully that helps people settle back and enjoy the games coming out instead of getting anxious over more announcements for a while. Edit, also, obligatory apologies to anyone who is really looking forward to this due to my earlier info. I said this before, but I only said anything because I was on Cloud 9 that week, and I probably should have restrained myself, haha. So Brazil has lost confidence in there being a Direct in this month of April. But there's a few things that I find very curious about this. One, if we go back to the prior post, he talks about how a lot of these things can be delayed or pushed back a week or so as they've had happened before, and oftentimes they don't really fully materialize until a week prior to the event. And we're still only in the beginning of April. This was posted on April 11th. There's more than a few weeks of time left in the month, so if there is a late April Direct, then they may not know about it yet. But also, he still had one source that said so, and this is the source that he felt more confident on prior, where he still said, hey, the Direct is still a go. Let's also remind ourselves that Necrofelipe from Universal Nintendo also said that he heard a general is happening in April. Of course, these things did happen a little while back, and it is always subject to change. We've already talked about how we think it makes sense for some type of Direct to happen in April. In part so maybe we can get a Shadow dropped game for April, and also in part so they could announce their July game, as we've always gotten some kind of published Nintendo title in July every single year of the Switch, and that likely wouldn't be announced in a late June Direct, or even an early June Direct. It would happen beforehand. So I think some news still has to come soon, at least in regards to a potential July game. And I think what's been made clear by these different things that have been said by these people is that no one's super sure what is going on. And if I were to tell you what I think is going to happen from what I understand, I'll just say that I'm still kind of thinking something is going to happen in the month of April. Maybe it's not a big general direct. Maybe Nintendo doesn't need a big general direct. Maybe they just need to give us something that announces a couple more things that gets us ready for a later year direct. Some type of presentation that's a holdover, which is where I will now start to entertain the idea of a Metroid-related direct. Again, I am entertaining this possibility. We do not know what is going to happen. But there is something about this that I do think makes some sense here. So, firstly, there is another rumor that somewhat supports this thinking. Jeff Grubb has said that he believes Metroid Prime 4 will be coming out this year from what he's heard from his sources, and also that marketing on the game should be kicking off in May. Why would marketing for this game be kicking off in May? Possibly because they may be revealing the game very soon. I would have thought in an April Direct, but maybe it could be a Metroid Direct, perhaps still in April, or perhaps in early May. And there are several things about a Metroid Prime 4 related Direct that I think would really fill in the gaps here. So, imagine this. Imagine if we were to get a Metroid Direct, and in this Direct, yes, we finally get the full-blown showcase for Metroid Prime 4. And I'll talk more on that in a moment. But what they also do is that they make an announcement relating to Metroid Primes 2 and 3. Metroid Prime 2 is a Shadow dropped game for April, and then maybe they could also say, hey, Metroid Prime 3 is coming out in July. And then all of a sudden, we have a Shadow dropped Nintendo game for April, and there's another one coming out in July. Or maybe what they do is they announce them as a combo pack or something in July. Point is, some type of July game announcement could happen in this Direct, and also potentially a Shadow drop, which would sort of answer to those weird situations we have going on with the April vacancy and the July vacancy. But moving on from those possibilities, I'll mention that if this is more of a Metroid Direct overall, Yoshio Sakamoto, the creator of Metroid, could come out and say that the sequel to Metroid Dread, Metroid 6, is in development, just to kind of hype up fans and get people thinking about the future of Switch. And this might be a good idea, because since it's a 2D Metroid game, maybe it won't be made ground up for Switch 2, but maybe made with both in mind. And so they could confirm it as a Switch game to show Switch fans that, hey, there are still Switch games on the way, kind of like how Pokemon Company announced Legends ZA for Switch next year. But this 2D Metroid thing, if that were even included in this kind of Direct, that would be something still further out, and I'm just entertaining possibilities here. I would say most likely they won't even mention that. But the main star of this show would be Metroid Prime 4. Nintendo would finally show this game off that's been in development for such a long time. Retro Studios over the years has continually hired AAA Western development talent. They've been building this up. You look at what they did with Metroid Prime Remastered. I think this is going to be a pretty incredible game. From what we heard of the Xbox Era podcast, the game is big and open and amazing from a visual perspective. So this could be an incredible showcase for Nintendo. So much so, I could almost see this being kind of like when Nintendo showed off Breath of the Wild back at E3 2016. It was a moment where Nintendo allowed most of the eyes to be on just this one game. They got all this attention and they really showcased just how amazing it is. And everyone was so excited about this game. But this was also happening when we were already aware that a new console is about to be coming out. and there's a lot of talk that Nintendo may finally at least confirm the existence of their next console by their next shareholders meeting, which is going to be happening on May 7th. Considering that Nintendo confirmed their release timing for Switch 1 back in April of 2016, we could be looking at a similar scenario here. Not entirely the same, but similar. And I think this is relevant because if we have a scenario where they fully showcase this amazing game that they've been working on for such a long time, there's going to be an excitement behind it. And maybe the game ends up being a cross-gen title. And if that's the case, perhaps they would want to show this off before announcing the Switch 2, and then when the Switch 2 is announced, they say, hey, that really awesome game we're working on, well, there's going to be a cross-gen next-gen version as well at some point. That could happen. Now, I've personally been divided on this idea of when Metroid Prime 4 is coming out. Maybe it's a holiday title just for Switch 1, maybe it's saved for a little bit later into next year so it can be in that launch window as a cross-gen title for both Switch 1 and Switch 2. But the point is that there are people who think Metroid Prime 4 is going to be shown off this year, and it may be a really big deal, and it may warrant its own dedicated direct. And if that happens, well, I personally would be extremely excited for just a Metroid Direct. It would be a wonderful holdover until, say, maybe sometime in June, perhaps later June, where we get a more proper Direct to showcase the rest of the year. Of course, would I prefer a Direct sooner, because I think there's a lot of questions to be had when it comes to Nintendo's presence this year? Absolutely. But of course, we don't know what's going to happen. We will simply have to wait and see, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about fun possibilities in the meanwhile. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.